Do you want people walking in the door to try wine, or do you want people to never walk in again? We have to leave a little more room for grace and explanation and not like esoteric bullshit.
Time for Wine Talks with Paul K.
Fascinating story.
This is Robert Mondavi from the Michael Mondavi Winery.
That tastes a lot of wine.
Having a conversation with Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary,
Michael Silacci, Opus One Winery.
Incredible conversation with Dr. Nia Ruth.
No matter what, you're definitely going to feel better.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today, about to have a conversation with Maryam Ahmed up in the Napa Valley. Introductions in just a moment. Wine Talks, of course, available on iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you hang out for your podcasting. Is sponsored by the Original Wine of the Month Club, now sporting the Napa and Sonoma series of wine. Hey, have a listen to Season 14. Just launched it last Tuesday on the 17th of January. Our first guest was Matthew Kanar, and we're going to talk about him in just a moment with Maryam. But great episodes lined up for Season 14. We're very excited about the subject matter and the content of what we're going to be talking about, so have a listen to that. But don't forget Season 13, our last episode with Kira Balota of Obrion Wine's unbelievable conversation about actually the intellectual side of wine. But not why we're here. Here to have a conversation with Maryam. So, well, I guess you would spell it Mariam if it was an English translation of Maryam, right?
If it was the Hebrew translation, it would be Miriam, but in Islamic, it's Maryam.
Oh, God. Okay, Maryam Ahmed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a pretty fascinating conversation, actually, we're about to have, because she is the founder of Maryam, I'm going to say Plus Company, but what do you say?
Either one. Plus
Maryam
or
Plus
and.
Company.
Yeah.
Maryam Plus Company. She was featured on the cover and named 2022 Wine Enthusiast Future 40 Tastemakers Innovators, nominated for the Social Visionary of the Year on the Wine and the James Beard Award. And she's appeared on the wine show Sparklers, where we just had our good friend Matthew Connor in. Do you remember him? Are you good friends?
Do I? Yes, I do. I remember him and his competitive nature right alongside me in the kitchen.
Yes, that's right. So tell me about that show. I had not seen it before, and I was fascinated to watch the little segment I did. What is Sparklers about? What is it? Where does it come from, and what do you do?
Sure. So Sparklers is a cooking and wine competition show hosted on the Som TV network platform. And that is downloadable to like any device. And what Jason Wise did, who's the founder of Som TV and who directed the series, was brought a bunch of folks together, 5 of us, is that right? 4 of us. Hold on. Me, George, Claire, Kainer, Megan, 5 of us to compete. And the premise of the show is just that all of us are novice cooks. Mm-hmm. And we're coming in with this wine professional background, and we're challenged with this task of creating dishes and bites that pair really well with a sparkling wine at hand in each episode. Wow. And you know, the whole show, it's different because there's no elimination. So you cook until pretty much the final episode, and it's points based. So there are points accrued along the way, but also smaller prizes accrued along the way. And it's a super fun show. We had such a fun time making it. And for all the competition you see on screen, there's like even more friendship behind the scenes. So
there was a lot of laughter.
Really good time.
There was a lot of laughter.
Lots of laughter and lots of wine.
Lots of wine, lots of food. It could be worse. Now you have a little bit of a food background. It's not totally fair to say you're an amateur, because you were with the CIA for how many years?
Yeah, I was there for a little over 4 years. I was the director of public programs, so in charge of our consumer education department. Basically, anyone who wanted to learn about wine or how to become a better home chef across various formats at the CIA. So I think what I say is I learned a lot by osmosis, running the team that led those programs, for sure.
No, it's interesting. My daughter went to the French Institute in New York after it was baking in Paris, and we went around looking for a cooking school for her. We told her first she had to graduate from college, and then if she wanted to pursue a career in the culinary arts, that she can, but not until she finishes her regular education. And So I'm going to lay this out for you right now. When it came to those conversations at the CIAs of the world, and we went to 2 or 3 other ones, it seemed like there was almost an attempt to encourage someone to circumvent college for a degree in the culinary arts in exchange for, like, maybe I become a famous chef on TV or something like that. So the point I'm trying to make is it was almost like we were encouraging kids, like, well, if you don't want to go to college, you don't feel like it, you can get a degree in food, and then you can go behind the camera and you'll be this famous chef. And we know that's not the case, right? What was the typical incoming student's sort of desire and sort of want when they started at culinary arts schools?
I mean, I think it's important, first of all, at that age, college entry age, you're still discovering who you are. And there's also an immense amount of potential for who you could be. So, like, seeing other people on TV makes you think, maybe I want that. Maybe I want to pursue that. I think that chef stardom is a part of what draws people to the culinary arts. But I think, just like so many other crafts, people who know they love it and want to do it can cut right to the chase. I saw that school explore a lot more than the culinary arts when it came to opportunities for students to learn, everything else like a regular college student learns about, but integrated with the culinary arts. So I think we could say that culinary schools are giving people an impression that one day they'll be famous. We could also say the same thing about TikTok. So I mean, everybody thinks they could be anybody now that TikTok's out here. So I just think, as long as, like, any school, regardless of which institution it is being realistic toward their students, and also being, like, as informational and educational as possible while people figure out what they want to do within their chosen field, then they're providing the same level of experience as any institution. And the CIA at Hyde Park is a 4-year institution, and there's master's options. So it is actually, with the best of the best as far as college goes. I wasn't a professor. I was on the fun side of things, teaching people who love to cook and drink about the subjects. So
that's an interesting take. I think it's an important conversation to have. Like I said, we went through the process of trying to find one, and I think for anybody who wants to be in that industry, it should go to culinary school. There was a woman on my show not too long ago. She actually had a degree in the culinary arts that was put out by Cordon Bleu at the time. I think it was a short-lived degree, but I think it was an AA degree, a certified degree, and she read books. And one of the books that was on the agenda was the Last Days of Haute Cuisine in America by Patrick Hugh, who's a friend of mine. But I thought that was really fascinating. She goes, we didn't cook really. It was a degree in the subject matter more than it was hands-on. But I would think you think it's important that if somebody really wants to be in the kitchen, wants to work the line, wants to be in the back house, where else would you go?
Yeah, I mean, it should be both, right? You should be getting practical hands-on experience too. And I think I might be a little biased because I'm a graduate from the hotel school at Cornell, and that's a very niche degree program, 200 to 300 graduates a year from that undergrad program. And I am so glad that I knew early on what I wanted, and that I found a school that was going to give me top tier education in it.
It's a very prestigious degree from Cornell to have. There's not that many hospitality colleges, actually.
There's not. No, yeah. But Cornell is definitely, I'm very proud of that piece of my education, and also very thankful that I had the option to find a school that was very good at what I wanted to learn. And I grew up about an hour from Cornell, so I was familiar with the place too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
My daughter's was recruited by Prune in New York, like when she moved to New York and was going to go to the French culinary school, which I forgot the subsequent name. Some of the chefs are like, nah, just come on down, come to the basement. New York kitchens, right? They're always downstairs and they're very small. But we'll get you to work, and you don't really need to go to a culinary school. And I think for my daughter, it was a very important step for her to go through the academic side of it a little bit, learn some of the basics. And then she was very, marketable afterwards, having had hands-on experience, in France baking bread. So that was very positive. But I think you're right, sort of a combination. Do you think that exists in the wine world as well?
That structure for
Yes.
education? Well, I also happen to have a degree in enology and viticulture.
Wow. You've been busy, girl.
So I guess.
Makes sense, right?
Good segue, Paul.
Where's that at?
No, here's the thing about that. And I know so many people from all types of degrees related to enology and viticulture, from undergrad, associates, and masters. And the best of those, no matter which level of degree you're pursuing, do combine this theoretical knowledge with hands-on application, because there's nothing like getting to a winery and being able to explain how to hook up a pump without actually ever having hooked up a pump. So you really need both. You really can't walk into a kitchen and not know how to use a chef knife. So
that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to have both. And I do, particularly, I went to the Walla Walla Community College program for enology and viticulture, and I absolutely loved my time at that school, and I had a lot of opportunity. And this was after I got my degree from Cornell, but I had a lot of opportunity for hands-on learning, both in the winery itself and also like all the functions of a winery, like the tasting room and managing the wine club and working for other wineries. So, I mean, I don't think I would have been able to teach myself that education in the amount of time it took me just by reading books.
What were you trying to do? Well, by doing all this, what were you getting at? Were you trying to find your niche in the industry? Were you're taking your Cornell education and sort of pushing the tangents of that, trying to figure out what you wanted to do? You actually said, no, I'm going to be in the wine business. I want to be in the consulting side. I want to start these other projects.
Yeah. Actually, yes. I had been working in distribution in New York City after I graduated, and I kept meeting people from the West Coast that had this like glow about them. Like they just ate something really good, or they had 8 hours of sleep, or they'd seen the sun, all of which was just not a thing at the time when I was working in New York. And I grew up in the state, I think I was at a point of exploration in my early 20s. And I was like, something about their life equation is missing in mine, and I'm going to go and pursue it and add that to like my life experiences overall. So I didn't know anybody in Walla Walla. I pretty much packed my car and drove across the country, seeing certain states I'd never seen in my entire life, getting to the border of Kansas and Colorado and expecting mountains, like someone who's never looked at a map, just like really new experiences. And I did pursue that enology and vit degree because I have always been really passionate about education, and I think also about helping people understand. And I just had seen in distribution how much was getting lost in the market about these brand stories and a number of like even initiatives that the brands were working on. And I know as one person, especially now more than 10 years into my career, that one person cannot solve all of those problems, but I feel like I can work through education to help minimize those things. And so that's why I went and got my degree in enology and vit. And anyway, I consulted the whole time in hospitality while I went to the CC, because I already had my degree in hospitality. So I helped at a lot of tasting rooms and events, because Walla Walla 10 years ago was, still emerging for sure. So it was a great opportunity.
I still think the wines of Washington are yet to be respected in their fullest value to what's out in the marketplace. I taste them all the time, and you go, wow, this is some pretty special stuff. But and we're going to talk about what's on the shelf in the marketplace in a little bit, because it's very complicated. I think you've witnessed that through your career, both in education on the street, that one person can't change what's going on out there, but we can collectively possibly change and educate consumers on what's going on. It's such a convoluted industry, and it's such a mess right now, in such disarray. So we need bright beacons like you to help guide the consumer through what this myriad and clutter, because it's ridiculous what's going on. I see you were part of the Les Dames d'Escoffier, and I've seen that a few times. I don't know what that is. Is that a group of women who study Auguste Escoffier's cooking? What is it exactly?
So Les Dames d'Escoffier is an organization. It's an international organization with a lot of chapters here in the U.S. that was started to celebrate women in hospitality, of course, with a really big emphasis on women in food and food media, and has also been a really philanthropic organization since its inception. And so I'm in the San Francisco chapter, and I was nominated and inducted while I was at the Culinary Institute doing the work I was doing there, and I'm still an active member now, owning Maryam and Company. But I think being in San Francisco, just like if I was in New York, right, it's a major market for women in hospitality and food and wine, and so the chapter is made up of food media professionals, cookbook authors, chefs, restaurateurs, winery owners, winery executives, you name it. And it acts as a really great networking platform for women in our industry, and then simultaneously gives back to women who are emerging or who have earned a lifetime achievement award for their work, and those are awarded throughout the year as philanthropy.
Sounds like a great group to participate. Do you think, like when you started at Cornell, how many women were in your class? Was it by then settled and maybe 50-50, or were we still pushing the envelope a little bit?
I don't remember as much disparity between men and women in the hospitality school as you might expect. I did feel that disparity in my winemaking program. There were about 20 of us, and 4 of us graduated women. 4 women.
Do you think that was different in Cornell, let's say 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago?
I don't know. I mean, in diversity work, you try to have the numbers in front of you before you make any
I just
sweeping statements, but I don't, maybe at large, in the sciences, right, that are really in engineering, things that have taken a really long time for women to be more represented. But I never felt necessarily out of place as a woman at Cornell, especially at the hotel school. But I did see a lot of the people who we brought in to like show us how the industry was working, or show us how we might become restaurant owners, etc. A lot of those examples were men.
My daughter was approached by I can't remember her name, the chef. She's in Chicago. She's got a Michelin star. When we were doing something, I forgot, we were in Washington, D.C., and she was approached by her, gave her a card. I want you to join this group. It wasn't Les Dames d'Escoffier, but it was a back house group. She was working on women in the back house, trying to figure out how we can organize and get some respect, so to speak. And of course, my daughter lost her card. And that's the way my daughter.
Well, you should ask her if it was Joanna James, because it sounds like it might have been. She's a documentarian. Their organization is called MAP that she runs.
I'll write it down.
And oh my gosh, I used to know this by the.
But she was
don't
I think she
put
was
this
an
part
Armenian
in the
woman.
interview. But she has a documentary out, and you're gonna have to find the exact title, because off the top of my head I cannot think of it. It's something on the line. But anyway, really cool documentary about women, and especially like the data of women restaurateurs and CEOs, and how meek those numbers are.
I'll bring it up. The chef was Armenian. I remember that because we were in Washington, D.C. for an Armenian, I don't know, it was on the concourse, and there was some kind of Armenian festival, and a very impressive woman. And so I'll try and, well, if I can find the card that my daughter lost, it'd be better, but I can't. So. But it's been a big subject, and the last probably 5 or 7 podcasts I've done have been with women of color, and I've been around this industry for 32 years, and there's an uptick in all aspects of inclusionary to the industry, and I've always sort of tried to peel back the headwinds that have occurred. And I go back to, let's say, the Napa Valley Vineyards Association back in the day, and let's say in the 50s and 60s, it was Brother Timothy of the Christian Brothers, and it was Louis Martini and Robert Mondavi. And that group, certainly they weren't deliberately being exclusionary. But do you think that those headwinds were created out of the sort of the snobbery of the industry? Do you think they were created out of the fact that women just weren't doing it, and it was sort of intimidating to get involved? Do you have any sense of how some of this exclusionary attitude was created, and then how now we're breaking through that.
Well, first, I mean, I think about the names that you just said, and bravado comes to mind as one of the characteristics, and a characteristic that particularly is well suited for men and not encouraged in women. And secondly, money, access to resources.
Yeah, well,
so even still, women are overlooked time and time again for financial resources. So just to get the winery started or just to make movement, you have to be able to have funding. Even then, you know, just because it was less expensive didn't mean it wasn't expensive at the time.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So I think those two are just like the sort of tip of the iceberg. And that's really, when I'm saying all of that, I'm actually really talking about white women. I'm not even talking about women of color, because that's a completely different situation. I mean, there were probably, I don't know the statistics or anything like that, but there were probably a lot of women who were working in the field, right, or working in agriculture, who really would have been passed over right away for any kind of opportunity like that early on.
Is it changing?
Slowly. I think that people are getting more creative about how to make it happen. I especially think the community of color, the diverse community, is trying to get there without being completely blocked out. You know, I see a lot of collaborative work. You see a lot more like co-op wineries popping up, and a sharing of resources, because it's not just financial resources you need, it's equipment, and there's overhead, and there's all kinds of things. And wouldn't it be easier if we all just shared a press, or all shared a forklift, or put an investment in for these tanks? And it might be complicated and might not be what other people would say makes sense for them, but in an industry that's been historically leaving out these swaths of people, they're like, well, we're going to figure it out. We're going to do it ourselves. And I think the co-op model and collaborative model have become really big. And I've seen it here in Napa. I'm sure that it's happening a lot of other places too.
You know, that you said something very interesting, actually. There was a wonderful girl I've had her on the show, but I talked to her. I've mentioned her before, and she makes wines from flowers in Oakland. Ayala. A wonderful, wonderful conversation. But the greatest comment, she goes, I've encountered sexism, racism, and grape supremacy. because she makes wine from flowers. And she goes into a wine shop with flower wine. They're like, no, we don't sell flower wine here. So I just thought that was a great comment. But I actually told her, I said, you know, more impressive in being a woman in this industry, a woman of color in this industry, you actually were able to get the ABC and the TTB to license a 40-foot container in a parking lot in Oakland. Now that was some serious stuff going on right there. But you said something interesting, and I think I want to look at that a little closer. I can't remember her name, but she was on the show. But she started a co-op in Vermont. Yeah, Vermont. And from this brainstorming and this trying to be inclusionary and trying to find ways to finance, to find ways to create labor, to find ways to be able to share equipment, she created this model for a winery, which was a co-op, but it also had this protection for the employees and the partners going forward for retirement and all these other pieces. And I thought, this is fascinating. So maybe out of all of this sort of think tank work like you're doing and others in this industry, we're going to come up with some pretty innovative ways to structure businesses, structure the wine business, structure potential restaurants or the hospitality world, all in all, because of need. Have you seen those kinds of things?
Yeah. I mean, I think like I think we all know that this mindset of capitalism is preventative, right? The whole reason that it works and thrives is that people will be kept where they are in a lot of cases. And the only way around that is to create new systems, because capitalism is a system. So like the only way to fight it in this current situation with these current laws and talk about alcohol and like a little bit even making things more complicated
Yeah,
is
exactly.
to find some kind of loophole that's legal that minimizes like the amount of any barrier, right? Finances, access to education and resources, like open sourcing and being able to have conversations with other industry members. I think a lot of times we think mentorship is inclusive, but it cannot be inclusive a lot of the time. You know, I think we have to be really mindful of how the system works for some people and not for others. And I think by this point, hopefully people are aware of that. But at the same time, there can be small things that add up that people don't equally have to deal with, right? And not everybody has to deal with this supreme, like serious lack of access to funding. And even like, you know, think about just the market. Vermont is amazing. There's a lot of hybrid work going on. There's a lot more acceptance of trying something different. There's different agriculture there. So just even like where people have to choose to pursue their livelihood is impacted by some of these resources and the barriers that exist.
You know, I have this segment I want to do, and I'm having I'm getting intimidated to produce it. And it may not even be just a podcast, or maybe a show of some sort. But I have these conversations with winemakers in Napa. You know, some whose families have been there forever, and so their land's all paid off, and the whole thing's a cash cow from now on. And then you've got people that are coming in the industry trying to figure out how to do it, and they make a lot of money doing something else. Primarily surgeons, eye surgeons, and asphalt contractors.
Lawyers.
But the concept is that I want to dig a little deeper in is people want to buy this lifestyle, right? They go to Napa, and this Napa could be in my opinion, like the worst example of what this is about, to the extent that they go there and the food's expensive. You know, tasting rooms are $85. I mean, who can afford that? I can't afford to do that every day. If I was going to Napa, go to 3 places a day, it's like $250. But you know, you look at that, you go, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing! Look at these chateaux and look at these vineyards," versus the organic growth of somebody that starts in it, loves it, has passion for it. And for instance, Molly Hill, who's the winemaker at Sequoia Grove, as she was, said, you know, when she was a young teenager, you know, I want that lifestyle. I want to be part of that lifestyle, not buy it and get the biggest chateau I can and then sit in my ivory tower. I want to be part of it, and I want to earn that right. And she's a fascinating conversation as well. But where did you develop this point of view? And where did you see all this evolving as you're going through your career? You went to school, you went to 2 schools, that you started seeing that maybe there's a need for a front here to help people get into.
So like 2 things first before I answer that question. The first is Molly Hill was one of the first female winemakers that I met before I started my career. I was on a scholarship, and she was at Sequoia Grove at the time before starting her own project. And I thought she was super amazing. And then when I moved out here, I got to reconnect with her in a professional way. And that's just always so fun when it comes full circle like that. And then the second thing is, I think the co-op you were thinking of in Vermont, is it called Calce Wine Cooperative?
Yes.
Yeah. They're doing so much research.
That's it.
Justine Bell? They were just part of a program that happened in Miami called ABV Ferments, and the whole conversation is anything but vinifera. You know, talk about like pockets of conversation happening in the industry. I mean, anything I think at this point is open for interpretation and experimentation if we have the time and resources to do it. But to answer your last question, I think I got really lucky very early on, but I explain often that wine for me was this beacon of gathering and conversation and celebration in a way that I did not experience growing up. So I was really fascinated by the effect that wine could have on bringing people together, because I love bringing people together. And I had from an early age loved sitting at the dining room table for hours, or planning meals or anything like that. And so I think it was like kind of in me. And wine just became this way for me to do the thing that I love, which was to help people understand each other better, understand where they were better, or where they were tasting better, and I took that with me from before I was 21. Like I just saw it as this opportunity to achieve a lot more than you could just trying to get like family members to get along over macaroni and cheese or something. I don't know. Yeah. And it was just like, for me, it was like, I almost felt chosen. I never even considered another career option. I only ever done this. So that has fed a lot of the decisions that I've made, where I was in New York and I learned as much as I could. I was a sponge, but I was like, I think I've learned what I'm going to learn from the people here. And what I keep learning is that the West Coast seems like a place that is really in line with my ideals and my values, and is also a place where I can continue to grow my career. And I've just followed that compass from place to place, but I've always valued people over the wine itself, because the wine is just a conduit for me to do my work. It could really be anything. I just love that this is the thing it ended up being, because it's really
I'm not
fun.
sure. And this is a great segue. Thank you, because you don't even know you, but
I'm like, uh-oh.
I'm not even sure I agree with that. Not that
Sure.
I'm trying to be combative here, because wine has this romantic soulfulness about it, and I haven't been able to define it. I have had a couple of people get close to defining it. You don't get it with pineapples. You don't get it with apricot wine. You don't get it with anything but properly made wine. And it's either this connection from your soul to the earth, or to humanity, or its history. It's 8,000 plus years of history that we've been drinking it. And if you think about it, it's probably not a whole lot different than those days, except that we have some technologies to clean it up and maybe do a better job of farming. But really, when it comes down to it, it's fermented grape juice and how we manipulate it as it goes. And my frustration in the industry is I go to the market and I see this stuff, this formula wines, the Poetic reds, and all the things. I keep bringing them up. And when I stocked the shelves in the wine shop in the 70s, there was only one of those, and there's actually a decent wine. That was the Gallo liters, 1.5 liters of the screw caps, which is what gave screw caps such a bad name until now. But there's something soulful for a human and a good glass of wine. The consumers aren't getting that message when they go to the market and see what's on the shelf. Snoop Dogg's Cali Red isn't going to create those conversations that you're talking about. There's something about a vitis vinifera wine made properly by somebody that has passion that creates those conversations. Do you agree with that?
You have so many things that people could in that statement.
They're gonna.
But I will say I agree with. I think it's like your statement is like, there is nothing like the entry point that's granted from well-made wine, for sure. However, my add or caveat to that is I know that the ideal consumer for a wine professional is not the actual consumer a lot of the time. And if we're talking about what's on the shelves, it's an even higher hurdle to help people understand the choice difference, especially when we're talking about a price difference. Versus in a restaurant, maybe people come more open-minded, they come ready, maybe it's an occasion. But the shelf, like the retailers of the world are stewards of the stories of wine, because that is really like the difference that it takes to get someone to upgrade or be willing to invest in something more expensive. And I'm saying that because I saw it even when we were teaching wine classes for a ticketed price, that a $30 class, for instance, brought in maybe a more excited but novice crowd. And the $75 class brought in people who were like, okay, I really want to learn and I'm here to like try wines of the Napa Valley. I'm getting really serious, you know? And so I think we have to like meet people where they're at
Mm-hmm.
as often as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our
Mm-hmm.
responsibility as educators, but also like even just as wine professionals to help people with that. So I don't know if I answered your question
No,
or
that's actually a really good point. Sort of meet them where they're at their, you know, if it's an economical level or if it's a social level or if it's a knowledge based level, that there's some place for everybody to start or
yeah.
continue or
Well,
develop their
what are you
appreciation.
really gonna say? Like, oh, we're not exclusionary, but like, don't buy that. Ooh. I mean, what do you really want, wine professionals, right? Do you want people walking in the door to try wine, or do you want people to never walk in again? One of the more interesting like training methods that I heard was from Stevie Stacyanis, who's the founder of Bay Grape, which is a wine shop, and she says like in her training, she asks everyone to think about the most intimidating place for them to go in. Like, where is it super intimidating for you? And her example is Ulta Beauty, because she hasn't worn makeup a day in her life and is like scared to go in there because she doesn't know anything, and she's scared she's going to look silly, she's scared someone's going to look down on her, or like
That's
she's just
funny.
going to be kicked out before she even walks in the door. And no matter what someone's example is, like think about that for a second. That's how so many people feel about walking into a wine shop or trying
Oh, for
wine.
sure.
You know, like
For sure.
we have to leave a little more room for grace and explanation and not like esoteric bullshit, you know?
Well, that's you know, I've had an experience with my social network manager here. We went to the market. I'll try to net this out real quickly, and we were shooting some TikTok stuff, which has no convertible value, by the way, dollar value. It's just for fun. And a woman came up and I recognized her. She was looking for wine. I said, you know, I'm in the business. What are you looking for? She says, oh, I want to find something other than I regularly drink. And I thought that was really cool because
Yeah.
that doesn't happen very often. I said, what do you regularly drink? And she said, Rodney Strong. I said, okay. I said, here's a couple of things here that are in that same price range that might be a little different. And then she walked away. and then and then she came back and we realized that we knew each other from like Little League or something, right? And she still walked away without buying something. And she knew that I'd been in the business most of my career. And I told my social network, I said, you know, you saw two amazing things here. Here you saw a person that actually was trying to break out of the mold that they're in, trying to find something new. But you also witnessed how emotional the decision is when she couldn't take the advice of a friend who's been in the business for 32 years.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she went back after I was done and bought like chocolate wine or something, but
Hopefully
might
she
have.
went and bought one of your suggestions, or down the road she did.
But it's
Yeah.
interesting that you just pointed out some interesting irony that, yes, it's intimidating, but we want to go to Napa. You know, let's say I'm taking a vacation, go to Napa, and we pay all this money, and we see all these chateaux, and you kind of go, wow, you're really, that's an unobtainable lifestyle. Like, right, I can't really, and maybe that's part of the intimidating factor of it when they don't know the part that you know and the part that Molly Hills knows, which is this is a very rewarding, passionate part of humanity to be involved with this industry and make people feel the way they feel when they have a good glass of wine. But here's what I read this morning on an article, which was that the industry is in a tailspin, and it wasn't necessarily this downward, you know, catastrophic sales problem, though it is in our industry in general, and there's a lot of reasons that we can discuss later. But I thought to myself, well, part of the reason is the generations behind mine and behind yours aren't drinking that much wine. They haven't had that moment yet. They're drinking, then I thought, wow, this is fascinating. You know, and like I went to the fancy food show on Monday and saw all organic and biodynamic foods. I mean, that's the de facto standard now, right? And the millennials, let's take them for example and pick on them for a second. They're drinking a White Claw, which is artificially flavored, gross, but at the same time they're concerned about the environment and want to only eat organic foods and fresh. And I thought, it just hit me the other day. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. But there is a problem with generations behind us not understanding those stories that you're talking about. How are we getting these stories to those kids and these generations? Because I think eventually we'll all end up there. We'll all end up with that moment where I go, wow, I get this pretty cool stuff, and discover what you're trying to teach.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting even the way that you framed it, because this is like really from a consulting lens, like the first thing I think is, well, we're already starting by thinking our end customer is the issue, when really it's probably us, right? Because
Could be, yes.
I mean, I will say, whether or not people agree, it's okay, obviously, but I don't think that the wine industry has adapted the way that it should by comparison to other CPGs. So we have not been a nimble industry. Obviously, we're moving the length of time and dedication for the agriculture from the equation, and just talking about the products and how we literally sell and make sales conversions are like really far behind other industry CPGs. And I have been flabbergasted by that from the beginning. It's one of the literally why I left distribution. It's like, wait, we're not able to compete because we can't figure out a technology or a way to tell our story more effectively than it is right now. I don't understand. And 10 years later now, we're still looking at very similar issues, right? So I just want to start by saying I would not call the wine industry an early adapter. And so what are the generations below me? I'm a millennial, by the way.
I have three. I raised three. I'm not criticizing. I'm just
no, it's okay. I'm just so people know where I'm coming from.
Do you drink White Claw? That's good.
No, I'll just say generally no. So I feel very strongly about the fact that if we are a product that's immovable, but we expect our markets to always be gaining, then I'm really not sure what any other industry would say to that other than good luck, right? But here we are, like, well, they don't know about us, they don't care. It's like, I'm not, I mean, well, okay, so how do we change that? That's like what I get really interested in. And all I will add to that is, you're right. Millennials and younger are drinking different things. They have, from generation to generation, just their parents to who they are, have diversified their diet, their values, their beverage intake, whether or not they even drink alcohol, and their health. Like, that's just fact. So if you know those things, then how can you use that information to change how you interact with them? And this isn't like some blanket thing that you can do for a brand, but it is something that you could be considering when you're building campaigns or educational series or a combination of the two, so that you can reach someone who, yeah, okay, fine, occasionally drinks a White Claw, drinks those little canned cocktails, drinks other things that arguably maybe are easier to transport, hint, or like have less impact on the environment, glass, right? Like, there's all these factors. And I'm not going to argue with you. There's a lot of people eating healthy food and drinking White Claws. You're right. And maybe, like, for now, that's really not our target audience. But the way that they interact is certainly something we could learn from, because I don't think that the wine industry has very often relied on what their consumer wants from a like data driven standpoint. There's been a lot of guessing and a lot of, we've always done it this way, and this typically works for the current market we serve, but not a lot of like, point. How do we know which direction to go next if we have no information / data to work from, right? So
it's interesting you say it that way, because you were in the distribution side, which has to be the middle of the conflict. Yeah, because on one side you're being pushed by a sales quota, and if you want to get a trip to Hawaii for free, you got to sell 10 cases of this, whether you like it or not. And then you've got the buyer on the other side who's addressing the consumer, and you're being pushed around. Basically, it's a brutal environment. Yeah, but it's probably, you're right. It's probably because the lack of this industry to be innovative to reach those marketplaces. And I'm not sure that Josh or Cali Red or Martha Stewart Chardonnay is necessarily the right way to do it. And I beat them up because I think they're necessary evil. They could be bringing the millennials or the Z's or X, I don't know what letter we're on, into the fold for us, to romance into the idea, because I have this romantic notion that at some point in the human cycle and the human soul, a good glass of wine, whether it's from a can, bottle, Tetra Pak, or it doesn't matter, changes somebody's outlook on life to a certain extent. That moment.
Yeah, makes
Sounds
them
like
think differently, or I mean, I have like people in my life who are nothing to do with the wine industry who are constantly curious. They want to know. They just have more literal, like, digital and physical space taken up by other products. Like, we are in competition for storytelling and for attention grabbing and for delivering on quality, for sure. But that shouldn't be an excuse. It should be like, okay, this is the challenge. So,
I have to be careful how I say this. I interview folks like you, knowledgeable, thought-provoking, learned, that have a place in this industry to teach, and we're going to talk about field blends here in a second. And then I speak with influencers, not necessarily learned, but being followed, being spoken with, being entertained with, and a lot has to do with how we market ourselves. And social has created this new platforms that, like you said, you can be a TikTok star tomorrow if you do it right. You can be a wine influencer star if you do it right. And we'll have the conversation off camera. I don't want to get in trouble.
Well, I will say one thing, though, to add to that. I know I'm talking a lot, but you're getting me
I
all
want you to
fired
talk.
up.
That's why you're the guest.
But like, this is another example, influencer marketing. I do not coordinate influencer marketing campaigns. So probably a number of people in the industry, a lot of them could speak to this much more eloquently and probably accurately than me. But I will just say, from my experience as a micro influencer and having gone to some influencer events, I think that is a huge miss, a huge opportunity loss that wineries are just totally happy to like throw money at, because there's this like lack of actual education, that is happening when someone's on your property. And I know that it has got to be hard to corral cumulatively 1 million followers with your 10 influencers that are visiting your property for the day. But I got to imagine, like, if you're willing to invest the money and resources and time to get them there, that the only thing that would make that worthwhile is if they can tell your story and be a steward of your story afterward. Otherwise, if it were me, what's the point? I look at influencer marketing a lot like I look at advocacy work. It is a lot of times it's grassroots, and it's more compelling that way. And if we're just hoping that like someone with 250,000 followers is going to like change everything about our relevance to the millennials and younger, then we're completely mistaken. And how do we not know that by now? And how have we not learned that lesson by now? What do? We're just complaining about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Forget wine for a second. I think in the world of marketing, I was telling my staff today, it's like, you can listen to the radio and they go, if you want to make $1 million overnight, you can just get your Shopify account or your Magento account or your BigCommerce account, and you could be selling products tomorrow, and you can watch the order click up, and it's like, no, it doesn't work that way at all. It's not even close. But yeah, that's an interesting point, because the premise of social networking has always been and will be, regardless of all the platforms and whether it's video, static imagery, or GIFs, is if one person tells 10, that person tells 10, they sold 100,000 people. Now, in our world of marketing today, they've added a whole layer to the funnel. We have an awareness layer, right? And the awareness layer costs money, or it doesn't cost money. It depends how you do it. If you do it right with the influencers, let's say you did that with a winery to tell your story, at least you've got all these influencers coming. They tell the story. Their friends see the story. They post a story, and who knows, maybe 1 million people will see it out of 25 influencers that come and visit your property. Are they qualified people? I don't know.
Yeah.
You would understand as much as anybody. I have 4.5 million likes on a video I did on TikTok. I'm not even in it. That's why there's so many likes. But it was just my friend opening a bottle of port with hot tongs at a very fancy tasting I went to. But the thing was, this is what cracks me up, and I try to articulate this sometimes with other influencers. A lot of the people that were liking it were doing it in Arabic, or they're doing it in Turkish or Armenian or Lithuanian. They're not even qualified
Right.
potential buyers.
They're not coming
right?
to Napa next week.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that number sure went up pretty quick. And
But
so
yeah, and think about that relationship to the numbers. Like you put something out there that's obviously eye-catching, disruptive probably to their normal scroll habit, and something they don't know that much about. Like you made people curious. I mean, that's just three things right there that a winery could do with their content development to help tell their story. Like
there's a guy I had on the show's name, the Wine Wally, and the Wally in colloquial Queen's English is idiot. And he goes to the he says that he goes to the market and he pulls wines off the shelf, tastes them, and he's got, I don't know, so many thousands of followers. It's an interesting conversation. Understood wine to the premise that he could tell people what wines on the shelf were better, value than the ones that next to it. I think that's a pretty good service. So tell me then, is Field Blends, which is your travel group, was that to set out to tell these stories, to get people to sort of, like you said, connect the pump and
yeah, I love
make it work? And
what a good way to bring that back around. Field Blends wine travel. So I do that through my company. I wanted to lead by example. I think it's easy to get all hyped up about CPGs and lack of innovation and just talk a lot, but it's another to really be in that work alongside people who are clearly also trying something new and innovative and different. And so I have consulted on a lot of different conferences and educational series and programs, and I just thought it would be really nice to do something 100% under my company and in my voice and with intentions that I could kind of own, right? Mm-hmm. And so I chose to go to Walla Walla for the first one because, as I mentioned, I'm a graduate from the winemaking program there, and I have so much community there still that when I brought this up, it was just one of those tell one person, they tell 10 people, and all of a sudden, like, the program was in place. And we created an immersive food and wine experience over 4 days in Walla Walla. Our trip to Finger Lakes is coming up June 5th through 9th. Wow. So that's an extra day because we learned in Walla Walla people wanted another day. So we added a day to Finger Lakes.
Wow.
But the whole point for me of Field Blends was engage the people who are unafraid to take a different approach to the narrative or the farming or the making, people who are impacting and elevating other people's careers, people who have been in the industry for a really long time or own generational land. Like, what does that look like? All of these conversations, and then to engage people's senses. So a lot of times, despite sometimes the best intentions of conference planners or event planners, it's like, we're just sitting there for 5 hours, like, while people talk at us, and how can you expect anyone to walk away as an ambassador of a region, let alone a winery, if they haven't seen it or felt it or tasted it or touched it or smelled it, And some things were really, really simple, like smelling the toast levels on new barrels, that like blew people away. And it was one of the easiest activations we did. And then there was a whole other one, like we dug a soil pit, for consumers to get in and see. And I think throughout my career, I've just seen, again, it's not thematic yet, like there's just this loss of information. And I don't feel like I need to separate wine lovers and wine professionals when we're going to a region and interacting in a completely different way, because that's the equalizer. Everyone who came to Walla Walla had never been to the region before. And among the guests were industry professionals and like wine lovers. And they had so much fun. The community was very real. We also do a scholarship program. So I work with regional boards to bring in scholarship funding. For last year, we were able to award 3 scholarships. And that was amazing. And then this year for Finger Lakes, we've been able to increase.
That's great.
It.
Congratulations. That's
great. Thanks. And those go to diverse wine industry people. So the application is actually opening very soon, next Monday. But I think I just wanted every layer to be like as sustainable and intentional as possible. We drove electric vehicles. We visited places that had very similar, if not like exact alignment in values. But I didn't ask people to shy away from a perspective if they felt it was different from the one we were trying to uncover. I mean, it's not it's very important, again, also that we're really having a full conversation and full dialogue. I'm not looking to have an agenda. I just wanted to engage people who I knew would be open and transparent about what's really going on, while also telling incredible stories about themselves and the land or the brands they're responsible for.
It sounds like it would. I mean, it sounds very cool, and it sounds like it would attract not only the wine novice to explore something they've never heard of, even thought of, and then but also the aficionado who hasn't had a chance to put their hand in the dirt. And probably the best tasting I've ever been on was the Chateau de Jacques and Beaujolais, Monsieur Cirieu's, and we put our hand in the barrel. And from the soil, from the Morgon or from Rui or wherever it was, we were smelling that dirt, and that all of a sudden, wow, this is pretty cool. And I think you probably understand that not every consumer has the desire to go that deep, so to speak. That was a good pun, huh?
Nice.
Go that to go that deep in the knowledge of wine. But just to know that it's out there is probably enough for a lot of people to just appreciate the value of the glass of wine. We're already on an hour, which is freaking phenomenal. We definitely, when I come up to Napa, we will do it live and continue on. We didn't talk about sustainability. We didn't talk about Maryam Plus. We didn't talk about a lot of things that I want.
Didn't we talk about Maryam Plus? All my ranting.
No, not really. Not all the things you're doing, and particularly the work with the inclusionary and diversity. I think it's really important. And having been in this industry as long as I have, I love hearing the perspectives and the changes. I think I reached out, for instance, to the Black Vintage Association, like, I don't know, 2008 or 2009. There were 5 members. I mean, literally. And now there's, I think, 250.
Yeah, the Triple AV, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I don't remember the acronym, but
the Association of African American Vintners.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And there were 5, so that's cool that there's more, and that look, and we all know, everybody knows this, that women have better palates than men anyway, so it's quite obvious. But I'm gonna actually, since you've been around this industry and you've studied at school, I have to ask you this question as the closing part of this conversation.
Oh boy.
This is yeah, you're gonna love it, because, by the way, I'm gonna give you 3 answers and you can pick one. And the average right now is still 33% right. So everybody.
Okay, geez, good.
But it's kind of like the Master of Wine test or the Court of Sommeliers test, where the answer is important to understand, but it's really like, well, how did you get to that answer? What's the rationale? Why do you think this is a Cabernet from Chile, kind of thing? So This is a French book. It's actually a French doctor from the 70s, Dr. Maury, who was not only a licensed MD, but he's also a homeopathic doctor. And so he wrote this book called In Vino Curitas, which is basically the wine is the best medicine. And I'm going to give you an ailment, like an allergy or anemia or something. I'm going to give you 3 French wines that potentially could help you. I don't know if it's cure it, but at least with the symptoms anyway. Let's pick one here. Let's go with nervous depression. Seems to be plaguing a lot of people these days. So you could have a young Beaujolais, a Bordeaux Medoc Red, or Côte de Beaune Rouge to help your nervous depression. And there's also a dosage that's associated with this. Which one of those would you choose?
And then do I give my justification?
If you can.
Okay. I would pick Beaujolais because it is lighter and brighter, and I feel like with nervous or anxious depression, that is helpful. I went away from Beaune because of like this beautiful but brooding nature, like
good,
let's see, why did I choose to not do Bordeaux? I think it was more so like I was thinking about tannin and sort of this like real bigness that maybe someone who's already feeling like nervous and anxious like could just use like a little more calm and a little less in oomph,
That's
in the wine.
interesting. The vibrancy of the wine could be affect your nerve. Well, I'll give you an A for the result. Why you chose that, but I'll give you an F for the answer.
What's the answer?
It was actually the Medoc Red, and here's why. According to the doctor. Now, this is 1975. So
yeah, it's fine. I'll listen to this.
So he sort of complains about Western medicine and all the things we take for like Ativan and Xanax and all this. Maybe Xanax wasn't even around then, but talking about treating depression normally, which creates a psychic fatigue in phosphorus deficiency. And so why a Medoc? Because the glycerin content is high, which gives you more phosphates in the fermented grape juice. So then that's his current logic. What's the dosage? How much Medoc should I have daily?
I feel like I would have bought it if he was like, it's like tea, all the tannins, it's like tea. I don't know, but how much?
Well,
this was in the 70s, right? So it's like lower alcohol.
Right. That's a good point. There you go. That's a great point. No one's ever made that point before. For sure. It would be 4 glasses, it's saying, but
4 glasses. I was going to say 2, but I was thinking of a California pour, so that could be 4.
Let's exactly. Let's call it a bottle because there are a couple of these ailments where it says we're not even sure, but you're going to feel better anyway.
So. Yeah, that's true. You're not even going to remember that you're depressed.
Exactly. Such a pleasure having you on the show, and I hope we can do it again when we come up, and we'll do it live and have a chance to shake hands and tilt a glass of wine.
That would be amazing. What really would it be? Beaujolais, Medoc?
I don't know.
Or Bone?
Well, clearly, if I'm nervous and depressed, it's going to be well, actually, I have a very good friend up in Napa. She has the Rare Cat brand. It's on the main street, Sharon Kazan Harris. And my podcast with her, the title was "Who Would Pour Bordeaux in Downtown Napa?"
It's Semillon, right?
No, she has
She does Bordeaux, but she does sparkling too, I thought.
Oh yeah, she does. She's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Fascinating woman.
Yeah.
Thank you again for your time, and we will get together when we're up in Napa.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks so much, Paul. I appreciate it.
Yeah, good luck and cheers.